So good afternoon, everybody. I am Amy Barish. I'm the Executive Director at Her Justice. And it is my honor today to speak with Carrie Goldberg, Victim Rights Attorney Extraordinaire, the founder of CA Goldberg Law, and a team that provides cutting-edge legal help for clients facing domestic violence, stalking and harassment, revenge porn, child abuse, and unfortunately, much, much more. Carrie has literally written the book about these problems called Nobody's Victim. Came out last year, and if you have not had a chance to read it, I highly recommend. So there it is. Yes, always. Never not working, as I say, never not plugging. It's a great book. So at Her Justice, where I'm the executive director, we stand with women living in poverty in New York City. And we do that by training and mentoring volunteer attorneys from all over the city to address their individual legal needs as well as systemic legal barriers. So to us, Carrie's work is really, really important because at Her Justice, about 85% of our clients are or have been victims of partner violence. And for many of them, that has involved online abuse of some form, including things like stalking and identity theft. And often this kind of abuse is not only deeply emotionally traumatizing, but also can result in severe financial harm for our clients. And so that's always an angle we're paying attention to, both that sort of self-care, making sure that taking care of themselves as humans, but also looking out for some of the financial harm that might come to them. So today we wanted to talk to Carrie in particular, because obviously, as we are coming to you virtually through a Zoom screen or Facebook Live, our lives since the COVID lockdown in March have really gone online so much more than ever before. We were pretty tech reliant then. Little did we know how tech reliant we were going to become. So I really wanted to hear from Carrie what she is seeing in her practice, which has always been about tech-supported abuse. But how, how have you seen, Carrie, how has that changed your practice in the past however many months it's been? I'm in COVID fog, so I can't remember anymore. I feel like it's always been this way. How has that changed your practice? And have you had to change the way you work as well to address any of these new trends that you're seeing?
Yeah, first of all, I'm so happy to be here, Amy, with you. And I'm a huge fan of Her Justice. And I'm happy to see all of you participants here too. We've got a good crowd. I mean, COVID has sort of overnight, it changed our practice as lawyers. It also changed my life as a business owner with a staff that suddenly was diffused all over the state and ultimately to other states. And so it's changed the practice of law, it's changed being a law firm owner, and it's also changed the type of abuse that our clients have experienced. Because, we've always said that, the internet is how we do everything. It's how we date, it's how we shop, it's how we consume our information, it's how we keep in touch with our family, it's how we order our food and our transportation. And, it's also not surprisingly how we hurt other people. But it's like right now, where we are so much more dependent on our tech, where we can only do our work if we're logging in, or we can only, for many of us, we can only go to school or monitor our kids going to school through a computer. There is really no way to avoid the screens. And so it's enabled new kinds of abuse, like Zoom bombing, inadvertent abuse, like we saw with Jeffrey Toobin, and then also, it's created a lot of new trauma for people who, have a past where they've been victims of tech facilitated abuse, like revenge porn or sextortion, and they have to rely on their gadgets, to do the most basic fundamental things like go to work. And then that's kind of putting aside the non-tech facilitated ways that we're seeing intimate partner violence change. With people having new ways to control their partner, threaten to, kind of shame them for going out into the community, shame them for not, new kinds of financial abuse and power and control.
Yeah, I mean, what you say is so, we saw a lot of this for our clients. And of course, the world is sort of experiencing this tech life differently, right? So we're experiencing it online and suffer from Zoom fatigue. Our clients are kind of in a different place where they don't have consistent access to technology. It's really heightened the digital divide that we live in. And for a lot of them, their only access to technology is their phone. And then if they're a victim of abuse, as you said, it doesn't have to be tech abuse per se. They're being controlled by a partner. They may not have real access to that phone on a regular basis, or their partner may have inappropriately extensive access to that phone. So just to back up for a second, because you obviously know this stuff so well, can you talk a little bit in particular about revenge porn, which is sort of the popular name for that, and what that is? The Attorney General actually, as it happens, the New York State Attorney General issued an alert today warning us all to be worried, aware of the increase in revenge porn. I'm just looking at some notes. She said that some video chat apps are recording a 70% increase in the use of their services since we all went remote, which isn't surprising because, as you said, this is where we're living. But can you talk a little bit about what is revenge porn, or what we call revenge porn, and whether you have seen that increase or change, in your work?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Revenge porn is the not very clinical term for the non-consensual dissemination of intimate pictures and videos. And it's typically, the most typical fact pattern is that you consensually share a nude image or a selfie during a positive moment in a relationship. And then when things go south, your former partner uses that to retaliate against you, spreading it through social media, through text messages, through DMs, to people that are important to you. And one of the, the most cruel ways to injure somebody and really affect their ability to survive and thrive is to send it to their work, send it to the victim's workplace, and to impact their ability to just earn a living. Because we can all ultimately overcome the end of a relationship, and that's usually what victims are trying to do is they're trying to exercise the right to leave a relationship. And this is somebody who's saying, no, I'm not going to let you get away with it. I'm going to humiliate you until you feel really sorry for what I've done, sometimes using that to coerce a person to return to the relationship. But if they can also impact their livelihood, that can have really irreparable harms, particularly now in this economy.
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen, so it's, as I was saying earlier, there's sort of this personal, emotional harm that's coming to somebody, but it goes beyond that, unfortunately, and can have an economic impact. We had a client not too long ago who was, like you said, and it often happens at separation, was leaving a partner who'd been physically violent for a long time. It had been a very coercive relationship, and she ultimately was able to leave. She had to be hospitalized for 2 weeks. When she came out, when she got her phone back from the hospital, she saw all of these notifications on her phone from various apps that had been used while she was in the hospital. So clearly she hadn't been using them. And she had noticed some funky things like that before she went into the hospital when she was still with her partner, like notification, your Lyft driver is here, when she hadn't ordered a Lyft, but she just thought it was a fluke in the app somehow. And last time we checked with her, he has actually charged to her accounts $6,000 worth of purchases. And we are now in the process of trying to protect her from all of that debt. And it's actually enormously complicated. So is that a kind of thing that you see? And what tips would you give people about kind of recognizing those red flags? Because she initially just thought, we all use so many apps during our day. They notify us of all sorts of crazy things, and sometimes we tend to ignore them. And what tips would you give to folks to be able to identify when something is a bigger problem?
I mean, I find that a lot of offenders are not very subtle, and they, especially if they're really, if the breakup is really recent, and so they're going out of their way to make it apparent to victims. I mean, I think when it's financial abuse and fraud, they might be trying to get away with it more, and being more subtle about it. And so I think when it comes to that, it's just like making sure that you're logging into your accounts and monitoring things, not sharing passwords, changing your passwords. Those like just internet security can be really important, because we do see situations like this a lot, Amy, where accounts are hijacked, where the offender gets the victim's password and then overtakes the account. Sometimes it's a bank account online. Other times it's a social media account. And what we often see happen in those cases is the offender will hijack the victim's social media account and then start impersonating the victim, sometimes sending their own the victim's nudes from the victim's account to sometimes to minors, then they'll solicit sex with inappropriate things with like their work colleagues, basically framing the
Right.
the victim or survivor. I use that word interchangeably.
And how, in the Attorney General's press release, she references the fact that we did pass a law in New York State last year about this revenge porn. But I'm wondering how you find law enforcement's response to these situations, because, they're really complex. And I will say that our experience, and we're dealing slightly with similar issues on different scales. But for example, the woman that I mentioned before who had all of her accounts hijacked while she was unwell and, now owes all this money, the companies are saying she needs a police report in order to challenge the charging to her account. The police have been disinclined to file a report because they say, well, you gave him your phone to go buy coffee one time, so you consented to his use of, I guess, all of your accounts and all of, all of your bank accounts. So exactly. So I think there's a training issue that needs to be done. But I just wondered what your experience has been working with law enforcement, because to be fair, these are new issues, they're complicated issues. I remember back in the day trying to even just make complaints about phone calls that police officers used to say, well, is it my jurisdiction? Where was the call made? Where was the call received? Our normal law enforcement approaches are a little creaky when compared to how quickly technology is moving. So how has your work been with law enforcement response to some of these issues?
I've seen so much variation. Our law is only about a year old. And so there's always, there's a big lag between getting the law and having the law properly enforced, and also having the law, even if it's being investigated, actually prosecuted, because sometimes prosecutors are the weak link who don't, and don't want to be creating bad case law or experimenting with new laws. I think that when basically the crime is the technology is the crime, I think there can be some initial resistance by our law enforcers, both at the stage of reporting it. The person that you're making the report to, we've often heard, they didn't necessarily get the memo that this is a new law. But then if it does get escalated to a detective, I don't think we're at the point where gathering electronic evidence is fun and sexy. But you're right, like we as civil attorneys don't have the power or the ability to be making subpoenas or sending warrants to tech companies to get the proof that we need, unless we did like a very expensive John Doe lawsuit. But the catch-22 is that often cops don't want to even take a report unless they have that evidence. They're the only ones who can get it, though. And so often we see offenders hiding behind anonymous accounts. You see this too. You'd be foolish to be flagrantly committing things like revenge porn and financial fraud if you didn't, create new accounts and hide your IP address and stuff. And sometimes we see that as an excuse not to prosecute or not to investigate the case, because the law enforcer might say, well, how do we know it was really that person? Or, that the real offender could have, been hacked, or, it could be somebody from, the other side of the world. We don't, this would be a misdemeanor. We're not going to extradite somebody for this.
Yeah.
So we really have to kind of get to the point where it's fun and glamorous for them to be, subpoenaing tech companies, because it's the one thing about these cases is that every single communication, was sent from a device through an account and was received by a device. And so there's actually a trail, unlike, we see with some other crimes.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely knowable. I mean, it makes me think of this crazy domestic violence case I had a million years ago, where my client got into her car one time to find that rats had been let loose on the inside of her car and had nibbled away at the insides, and it was horrifying. And you want to file a complaint, and you can't fingerprint a rat. I mean, that could have been anyone. Obviously, it's not anyone. But to your point, with these cases, there is a trail, there is discoverable evidence, but the tools at our disposal aren't really designed to discover that evidence. And we're sometimes caught, it feels like we're going in circles. And then obviously for our clients, the people who've been victimized in this way, they feel like no one's believing them, or no one's taking this seriously enough, because our systems, qualify it as a misdemeanor or don't give us the civil leverage that we need. Do you have thoughts about, I think for us, we would love to be able to talk to some of the bank companies or these app companies and say to them, you need to partner with us in making sure people are not misusing your device. That shouldn't be good for your app any more than it's good for our clients. Is that an area that you've investigated at all?
Yeah, and I think it's so important. And I all these companies, they don't want to have their product being put to ill use. But it is, I think, sometimes hard to get to find the interested people and to even have them exist at these companies. Back in 2014 and 2015, when even tech companies like Facebook and Google didn't have revenge porn policies, it was still within their service agreements that you could send naked pictures of somebody else without their permission. Back then we started working with some of those companies. I was a board member at Cyber Civil Rights Initiative, and Kamala Harris also had a task force that I was on. And kind of overnight, in the summer of 2015, Google, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat all created policies, and they started really staffing up and trying to take seriously the community standards and stuff. So I think it is something that can be developed and grown. And I know that companies like Uber and stuff, but when you get to companies like banks, it's are they really thinking about intimate partner violence? Are they really looking at their algorithms and understanding behavioral patterns of somebody suddenly logging in from a VPN? Are they tagging that? Or are they just saying, hey, you've never shopped at, Walmart in Timbuktu before, and so we're going to flag your account for that?
Yeah, it's a great question. Because of course there are other private entities that do that, right? I will get notifications that I've logged into a device that this app hasn't seen before. Was that really me?
Right.
But, so the possibility is there, but we don't see that for sure. Another thing that I wanted to ask you about is, again, we're all in different places. So I want to make sure that we're all staying safe, that the attorneys who volunteer with us are staying safe, because we're all living behind these Zoom screens. But at the same time, our clients are also facing abuse, and oftentimes their only access to tech, as I said, is their phone. Does an abusive person or someone who wants to do harm have to be a tech genius to do this? If your only tech access is your phone, are you still potentially at risk?
Absolutely, because and you certainly don't have to be a tech genius to do a lot of harm to somebody else, because this stuff doesn't require hacking. Anybody with an internet connection can take a naked picture and post it onto social media. They can create new social media accounts. You don't have to be, a follower or friend of your target to go to a pedophilia blog and start, defaming the person and making up horrible rumors so that that information comes up on their Facebook results. I mean, it's there's really there's really no way to stay safe, and there are a lot of there's basically like a playbook and tools available for somebody who's trying to do harm, and there are a lot of products that are available at places like the App Store and Google, to anonymize your text messages and stuff. I mean, there's and also websites where you can go to recruit people if you want to start a campaign of harassment. I don't want to give anybody ideas, but you so don't have to have a degree in computer science to really ruin somebody's life.
Yeah, and what I think is so important about that is not only to strike fear in the hearts of everybody listening, although it does that as well, but is to sort of acknowledge that that these things are real, that if I've often said this with clients of partner violence generally, that if you feel in your gut that you're scared, or you have this gut feeling that something's off, you should listen to that feeling, because you're probably right. And I feel as though that's the same thing with technology abuse, that, it's so easy to overlook some of these indicators, like our client did with some sort of funky notifications from Lyft. And I don't know if there's any way for you to articulate what would be a red flag for somebody, since the protection is only as good as it can be. Absolutely look at your security settings, absolutely pay attention. But even with all of that, if someone wants to stalk you or harass you, they can. Is there any kind of red flag that folks should be aware of?
I mean, Amy, I just feel like in my cases, it's very rarely subtle. It's usually like, I want you to be humiliated, and I will make it so that every single direction you look, every text on your phone, every email is somebody telling you that they just got sent your naked picture. And every, the first 10 pages of your Google results are to Pornhub with that. And it's basically like, so it's unavoidable. But, it always starts somewhere. And so, I think that getting emails, saying that there's been a change to your password or someone's trying to log in, are really important indicators that something might be awry. I had a client who was impersonated and framed. And one of the things that the offenders did was create Craigslist ads soliciting sex. And so she kept getting emails wanting her to verify these Craigslist ads, and emails wanting her to verify these brand new Microsoft Outlook emails, because that's another thing that offenders will sometimes do, is create new profiles and content to try to frame you or impersonate you.
Yeah, it's interesting to note that we've talked about partner violence, and that's a lot of what we see at Her Justice, but it also can be in other relationships, because unfortunately it's not always your ex-partner who's out to get you. And we had a case recently where a client's mother actually has been getting into her account. She suffered abuse from her mom when she was a young person. She's now an adult, but her mom has her social security number and has her birth certificate, and is able to get into her student loan accounts and change the information in there so she can track where her daughter's going to school. She's gotten into her health insurance accounts. And so we often have clients who will just say that it feels as though their partner or their mom knows where they are all the time, or has information about them that they don't think they shared. And for us, I know that's sometimes an indication, okay, let's do a tech review. Let's see how they knew this information. Because as you said, it is so easy to know that.
Yeah. And I mean, like in our case against the dating app Grindr, our client's offender was impersonating him, sending strangers to his home to our client's home for sex, and using the geolocating technology to guide them there.
Wow.
And so, these are tracking devices as much as they are anything.
Yeah, so
we have Cornell, we have Cornell Tech. We should give a shout out to Cornell Tech that has been working with the city and has created a program at the Family Justice Centers, courts, to actually do scans of people's phones when they think that they're being, if they think that somebody has installed key logging software or some sort of tracking app.
Oh, that's great to know. That's a terrific service. Absolutely. I wanted to get back, earlier you mentioned a task force that was chaired by Kamala Harris back in the day. And I know that you've seen that the incoming administration, President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris, have announced that they're going to be launching a task force themselves to tackle online abuse, particularly online harassment, stalking. And not only do we desperately hope you'll be on that task force as well, but I wondered what your suggestions would be as some of the first things that task force might address.
Well, my thought is that they're going to really be prioritizing exactly what we've been talking about, which is the changes in intimate partner violence as a result of COVID, because they're going to be coming into the administration still dealing with that. And so I think that the more information that we can be giving them about the changes and patterns and the new types of abuses that our clients are suffering, I think the more likely it is that they're going to kind of take our initiatives and run with them. So I've actually heard that that's what they're kind of looking at in terms of like tech facilitated harms.
That's great. Yeah, absolutely. I think, out of this calamity, let's at least find some silver linings. If we can learn how to do this better because of the pandemic, that would be a terrific thing. One of the other things that I hope we learn, which is a little bit unrelated, but in this same tech space, is that with so much going virtually, like I said, our clients, by and large, their tech access is through their telephone. So we had problems when the lockdown first happened, that we had a client, for example, who'd been harassed through all of her tech devices. So she'd actually shut down all of her accounts. And the only way she was getting tech was at the public library. And then that was no longer available to her during COVID. So that was a stressful time for us because we couldn't reach her, but obviously for her because she was completely shut off from the world. Now we're in a place where court appearances are virtual, and it's up to the litigant, if they're unrepresented, or the litigant's attorney, to figure out a way to appear virtually. And for our clients, Wi-Fi is not reliable. Having a quiet, confidential, safe space from which to appear is not an assumption they can make. So we've made a couple spaces in our offices available for our clients. If they need to appear virtually, we can hook them up. But I know this is a little off target, but I'm just thinking that other side of tech. Do you have thoughts about that, sort of lessons learned from COVID? There are a lot of benefits to going virtual, for our clients too. They don't have to travel across town. It can be, might not have to take a day off from work, but there are these downsides, not only the exposure potentially. I'm worried about the security of, hopefully the court proceedings online are secure, but we want to be careful about what's going on there. And then this assumption that people can naturally take advantage of tech, which isn't an assumption we can always make for our clients.
I agree with you. I mean, it just so exacerbates the financial divide and overlooks the fact that so many victims of IPV are low income and stuff. I mean, I think it is such a benefit to not have to take all that extra time off of work and stuff. In some ways, it's a gift and makes us all more efficient. And I think it's wonderful. I mean, it's wonderful that you have created spaces for clients to make appearances. Courts need to do that too. And that needs to be a priority for people to have privacy and absolutely can't be overlooked. I think one of the other benefits of COVID is that a lot of the statutes of limitations have been expanded and extended. And I'm really glad that our governor has logically done that, because this is such a time of trauma and crisis, especially for New Yorkers, especially in the beginning in March and April. And no one was sort of prioritizing filing lawsuits. Lawyers were scattered everywhere, and everyone was just worried about their life. It was life and death. And so having having longer statute of limitations and expansions. I think it's like half a year in, don't quote me on that. I shouldn't say that. But that's been good.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things we're actually concerned about, I think we need extended timeframes for people. I also am anticipating a real pent-up demand, again, in the court where we practice family court, we do divorces, and this may be true in other courts as well, where you have a priority of horribles that you're dealing with during a global pandemic. So to your point, you're worried about health, you're worried about your kids, housing potentially, in New York City, we have a eviction moratorium, but we don't have a rent moratorium. So that's all eventually going to come due. And so the courts are struggling to keep up with the very limited demand they have right now. We're expecting there to be a big surge once, vaccine happens and once we're all moving about more normally again.
Yeah, and we were just talking about how, in some situations, our clients are kind of benefiting from some of the delays with orders of protection, temporary orders being extended during the confusion with the courts, while other clients, particularly your clients that you mentioned who are adjusting their custody arrangements or their child support, are really badly prejudiced by these delays because courts are not seeing those issues as urgent, necessary things that should get their time and attention.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're also seeing more of the financial abuse implications because the reality is everyone's really struggling financially. So, we do divorce cases where an abusive partner might be economically abusive and accruing debt in their wife's name, our client's name. That's only going to be even more extreme now if people have lost jobs during this time, or as I described before, the possibility where the partner has access to all of her passwords because they are a couple, and he can start ringing up charges on her accounts and through her apps. I guess one question is we're winding down a little bit that I did not prepare you for, Carrie, but I know that you are someone who can think on their feet. No, I'm just really curious. You have done this work. You've really been out in front of this work before a lot of us were knowing how to articulate what the problem was and trying to come up with creative, particularly civil justice approaches to these challenges. I guess I want to know, what is the thing you're most focused on right now? And do you feel safer or less safe than when you started your practice?
Oh, wow. The thing I'm most focused on is the liability of tech platforms. Because I think that is the root of the problem here, is that we're expecting everyone to be good, except for the tech platforms that are making billions and billions and billions of dollars off of our data and our profiles. And so if they shared the liability for the harms, for the child pornography and child sexual abuse material and revenge porn and the stalking that's happening on their platforms, we would see a very significant reduction in that, because they would be using their expertise in behavioral analysis and data collection to be able to identify the behavioral patterns of predators. And they would flag that content and just be much more proactive. There'd be such less an incident of it. So I'm really looking at new ways to hold those companies liable. They're of course protected by federal law for any content that users post. It's been very extravagantly interpreted by our courts. But I think that there's a lot of room for reforming that law, Section 230, and also creative lawsuits. So I think the best thing that lawyers really could be doing right now is in addition to the really critical, if we're talking about Maslow's hierarchy of being, like keeping people safe is number one. Orders of protection, custody arrangements are the most critical things that any of us do, just stopping, the pain and stalking. But if we, can stabilize those types of things and bring more creative lawsuits, for problems that we can't figure out how to resolve, and like looking at the cases where you're like, what is that solution? There might be like a creative new case to bring against somebody that you're not even thinking about. And if you have this case, probably there are other people that also do and are also struggling with the same issue. And so, there, could be some awesome new types of litigations, experimental. I call them like laboratory cases where you're kind of experimenting with new claims. Like we held Grindr, we tried to sue them under a products liability theory. There are just ways to tweak the law. It's a creative field that we're in, and I think it's exciting to be a lawyer dealing with constantly changing issues and technologies.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. That's a great way to go out on, energizing lawyers. And we're all going to become tech superstars because we're forced to. So now we can take on some of these tech cases that we might otherwise have shied away from. But thank you again so much. I love hearing your innovative solutions. We're trying to be innovative too. We're trying to, as you said, there are so many people suffering from this kind of abuse right now, and it doesn't get recognized as much as it should. So, if this is happening to you, raise your hand, talk to somebody, get the help that you need for sure, because it's real. That abuse is real and really harmful. And so I want to thank you, Carrie, for joining us for this conversation. Always exciting. We will be posting the recording of this conversation on our website soon. And please stay tuned for upcoming Justice Talks, and let us know what you would like to hear about or who you'd like to hear from. You can tweet at us or let us know on our website. We'd love to have more of these exciting conversations. And thank you, Carrie, for continuing your battle to try to keep us as safe as possible.
Thank you, Amy. Likewise. Thank you, everyone at Her Justice. This was really fun.
Great.